Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tradesman Experience. This is the podcast built by tradesmen for tradesmen. My name is Josh, and in the virtual studio is, of course, the man himself, Greg Giroux. Greg?
How are we doing?
Good morning, sir.
Oh, good morning.
Man, I tell you what, you and I spend more and more time together of building and reconstructing, especially the coaching business. And we have the 2-day business builder coming up September 26th and 27th, where you and I will be in St. Louis, Chesterfield. And we're going to be teaching business. We're going to be teaching finances. We're going to be teaching leadership. And I always make the joke, like it's so immersive, we do everything but hit you. And that's even not out of the question. So when we did the first one in the spring, what was your kind of take me back to there? What was your feel of the room, and what were your thoughts on that? Because that was your first one.
I was going to say, I was nervous as all hell to start that off. So I didn't know really what to expect. I thought it was going to flop on my end because I had no idea. This is the first time I ever tried it. So I went into it. It seemed like it went pretty well. I thought it went awesome. I thought everybody was super engaged. There was no confusion. I mean, there was a lot of questions, which is great. But I think it went pretty well overall. I think everybody took away a lot of good information. I mean, as much as they could. You're drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot to take in. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say that we lost them, but you start to glaze over because the bucket's full. There's only so much information you can take in. And I think both of us did a pretty solid job delivering as much as we could in that short period of time. And again, it was more the overwhelming sensation I got from the other side. Like, wow, there's a lot to know. Yes, there is a lot to know. Welcome to business.
Welcome. That's something right there, because when we make the decision to go into business, no one ever pulls us off to the side and says, hey, it's going to be harder than you think. It's going to take longer than you think. You're going to lose more than you win, especially in the beginning. You're going to have to work endless hours. You're going to need to hire people. You're going to have tough conversations. You're going to have to learn how to sell. You're going to have to learn how to read financial gauges. You're going to have to learn how to be a leader. You're going to have to learn operations of business. You're going to have to learn everything around your craft, around the skill that you're building a business on. And it's going to take years.
Years. I mean, most of it's by trial and error. And fortunately, I did have somebody pull me aside and was like, kid, don't do this. It's more than you think you're biting off. And I'm like, no, I got this. So I didn't listen because I was young and ambitious. So I did have somebody, but I mean, nobody broke it down to that caliber. Nobody ripped it down to every little micron and made a list of all the things I'd be responsible for and need to know. And that might have scared me a little bit because there's that list. Your craft, when you start a business, is honestly the smallest piece. It's seamless. It's easy to you because that's what you're good at. It's what you do. It's everything else that cripples businesses. It's the business piece and all those things that you just listed that you're not great in. And how could you be? You never learned them. You never experienced them. You never tried them.
Yeah. And what you and I attempt to do is compress all of that into 2 days. And that's why it's called
highlight it, right?
Yeah. We go deep into certain topics and then we stay surface level on other ones because it's 2 days. And unless we kept them in there for 20 hours a day, where we had a 40-hour session, it's still just going to be
you're never going to retain the information.
You're
it's impossible.
But the opportunity to be in a room of people like Matt and Nate, like Sonny, like Ryan and Brent, like Joel, like these guys, like when you come to the business builder, you're surrounded by people that also want to win.
And like-minded people.
And want you to win. Right? They also want you to win. They're not coming in to try to beat you. They're trying to come in to elevate each other and having that sense of community. And I know
that's huge.
there's businesses since the 2 day the first builder. There's companies that I know that still talk to each other and help each other.
That's awesome. I mean, that was the whole point of the Facebook community, right? Is to
Hmm.
get guys to communicate and talk to each other, have conversation.
Yeah,
There's no secrets. The book of business and the rules of business are all the same. They've never changed.
that's
So if
right.
you think you have some secret sauce over somebody, you're sadly
Yeah.
mistaken.
Now a ticket for the business builder is $8.99. What do you think the ROI is on that?
More than $8.99 by a lot. I
10x,
mean, what
20x, 100x?
on one piece.
Mhm.
If there were 50 pieces to that total, one piece would pay for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was quite 50, but we talked
The-
about a lot of stuff.
just being able to read and understand your financial gauges is going to make you more than that. Learning
Easily.
how to make one correct hire is going to make you more than that.
It will save you more than that. Yes.
Yeah. So,
That'll get paid for in the first week.
yeah, in the first interview.
Right.
Yeah, because you're going to know if you want to move forward or not. So, the business builder for me was the one that we did was fun, but the idea itself was this kind of dream or creation that I had years back of how to bring a small group of people together and immerse them in all of the things that surround their craft.
I think we nailed that in the first one.
We did, and we had a lot of good feedback, and I'm
We had a
really,
good time.
really excited. And it's fun. Like we feed
Yep.
you, right? Like we provide lunch,
It was good.
and I might bring a Nerf gun this time because some guys were dozing off the second day.
Again, I think that was more glazed
It
than
was,
those.
they were full,
Yeah, they just couldn't take any more information. They're like,
maximum capacity.
they're still they're thinking about the first thing you said, and we're on
Mhm.
4, 5, 6, and it's just in one ear and out the other. I'm like, it's overflowing. You gotta pump the brakes.
Yeah, and learning some of that from the first one, we're going to make some alterations for the second one to make it even better. But
Always
the
improving.
trying to. That's the goal is to continue to make it better. And I also have ideas in the future of having one or two more speakers, like somebody that specializes in marketing, for example,
Mhm.
and someone that uh, specializes in X or sales or something, right? It's being able to again to bring this level of business intelligence and business maturity and leadership and finances into a room of 25 people because that's the capacity is 25. And we do that because it is hands-on. I mean, we do things in real time and we solve real problems and we role play and we have conversations and we put people's P&L up on the sheet and we go through numbers, and it's not it's not just a 30,000-foot view with a room of 100 people. Like we get down in the weeds with everybody.
It's fun.
It is fun. So the tickets are on the website at thetradesmanexperience.com. Again, it is a limited seating. If you're flying in, fly into St. Louis. And once you sign up, I will get a notification and I will confirm that you have all of the details so you can get your hotel room booked and get your flight booked and all of that. So go check that out, get your ticket. All right, moving to topic of the day. Greg, there's a common phrase used in business a lot. Cash flow is king. How many people do you think really understand that and understand the importance of that?
Very small percentage. Very small percentage. As far as the audience we're talking to, a very small percentage.
Mhm,
Some might understand what it is, how to leverage it and use it to your advantage or disadvantage is a different story.
mhm.
I mean, cash flow, cash itself is the blood of your business.
So what is cash flow?
Cash, money in your business.
So money continuously flowing in. That's
That
right. It's
the
like
flow,
cash
yes.
flow, but the flow of money, the flow of cash into the business consistently. And I don't mean like once every 45 days. I mean all the
No,
time.
and it can be as long as you account for it, as long as you plan for it. And that's where it gets tricky because there's jobs that require more capital to support while you wait for your money. And if you have no money and you walk into one of those situations, you'll find yourself halfway through that project with negative money. And then you're leveraging supply houses and maybe a line of credit you have, and you're paying interest on that. And you're banking on the fact that you're going to get paid. So you're taking a huge risk. But again, some of the risk is part of business. I understand that,
Mhm.
but you have to be smart with it, and you can't go from, you know, yourself and operating off of, the average, the account balance is an average of $10,000 a month. It fluctuates, goes up and goes down. And then you take on a $500,000 project. Well, in commercial or larger projects, most know that the payment terms are less than ideal,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10. And it's a lot of that has to do with the process on the back end, because you're the subcontractor working for a contractor, and that contractor is working for an owner. So when you get paid, the subcontractor is the last at the end of the line, right? So the contractor has to perform the work, hire you, you do the work. Then they show the owner you did the work. So as you say, hey, I've completed this work, here's my AIA or my rec for payment, they take that. It takes a couple weeks for them to compile it and put everybody's recs together for all the trades. Then they present that to the owner who they're getting paid from. They review it, go through it, confirm it. So half the time there's engineers involved that have to verify what you did. Then it comes back down the chain. They pay, takes 30 days. Then they get it. They reconcile, make sure everything lines up. Then they pay you within 30 days.
Mhm.
It's a 90-day turnaround. And everybody's like, well, I thought I was getting paid in 30 days. Well, technically you are, but you get caught in a cycle of, if you do it every 30 days, you'll get caught up. But the first
Mhm.
one is going to be 90 days. So you've got 3 months of expenses you need to cover, payroll and materials that you need to front. I hate to say it, it's aggravates one of the most aggravating things in the trades businesses is we're a 0% finance bank.
Mhm.
We're a bank at 0%. What a great opportunity. I would love to borrow money at 0%.
The large project, you brought that up. Somebody takes on like a $500,000 project. Well, we know that 30 to 40% of that's probably material. A big, depending on the job, but even if
Mhm.
30% of that's $150,000. Do you have $150,000 sitting around to purchase the material? No, you've got to leverage the vendor if they allow you to make that size of purchase, right?
And
Or
how
even
long will
if you're
they let you
doing
leverage it before they shut you off?
right. And even if you're doing half of that on the front end, that's still 75 grand. So one of the things to be careful of is when chasing a large project is one is you need to get a deposit because you do need to um, be able to fund that and not finance it at 0%. But also you've got to look at it and go, do we have the manpower to do this project? Or are we small enough where we're going to be wrapped up in it entirely, where we can't produce any other work, which then eliminates cash flow?
That's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
That's
And
dangerous.
and now you're solely dependent on this one project, and now you're fighting to get it done so you can get back to generating cash flow.
The best well-oiled machines, and I've found this balance in business myself, is to have both sides. One might be a little bit more of a pain in the ass than the other, and it doesn't seem as easy, and the cash flow isn't as
Mhm.
great, but it fills in all the gaps. I use the service side of my company to essentially fund the 0% bank while I wait for the big checks to come in. Because at the end of the day, I get checks 90 days later and all those expenses are paid for. So that's a good feeling when you get it. But then
Right.
again, you can't get excited because the next rec's coming and you're gonna have to front
Mhm.
all that material. So you really don't see that gain. You don't see any profit from a big project until the very last payment, which is usually tied up in some type of retainage. And you wait an extra period beyond that to get that money. And sometimes you have to fight for it. And
Mhm.
that's your profit. That's the profit. And
The oth
that's what makes that difficult. But again, you
Yeah.
have to play that cat and mouse game of making sure you get the money, you have enough cash flow to support the first period, and then moving forward, you can sustain that
Mhm.
It's the leapfrog. You're taking this month's payments to fund next month's expenses.
One thing that shocks me too is companies will get into these subcontractors, especially will get into these contracts and never discuss payment terms or progress payments, or and not even discuss or negotiate it. Ask what it is.
Well, that's because the attorneys create them, and they're usually pages and pages and pages of shit you don't understand. And you're like, I just want this $300,000 project. Sign my name. I used to do that. I used
Mhm,
to skim through and be like, yeah, it sounds good, whatever. There's two parts to that that aggravate me. One, it doesn't matter what it says in it. You're going to sign it if you want the project, because if you don't sign it, there's a guy behind you that will. So you have to kind of understand at least what it's saying so
mhm,
you know how to best prepare. Doesn't mean you can change anything that's in it. Typically, you can't. Sometimes you can squeeze them a little bit here and there, but for the most part, the insurance companies push all what happens in these contracts via the attorney. And that's what it is. It doesn't get changed. It doesn't get edited. And these guys won't move because they know they have you.
mhm.
They'll find somebody else to sign that contract. So you sign it, and 99% of them say in there in some fancy language, you will get paid when we get paid. So if you send them a bill in 30 days and your terms are 30 days, your terms are as good as shit because you signed the contract that agreed that you'll get paid when they get paid. And that could
Mhm.
be 2 years. If they don't get paid and they don't collect their money, you don't get paid and you agreed to it. So you can't go barking down their throat that they're 31 days or past due. They don't care. They'll just come back to you and say, paid when paid. Doesn't matter. You can kick and scream all you want. And then you get into this piss and match of, oh, I'm not going to show up on the job if you don't pay me. And they say, okay, well, read page 5. That says if you don't show up, we can back charge you.
Mhm.
So now you get caught in this shit situation. The idea is to not get upset, plan accordingly around these contracts, and be smart about it. So knowing that you have to buy a piece of electrical gear or a steel package that cost you $100,000 before you step foot on that job, you say, hey, I'm ordering this material today and I'm starting the job in 30 days. Here's my rec for materials purchased. Most of the time, if you get a good contractor, they'll
Mhm.
say, okay, prove it, show us the slips to it. You kind of have to expose a little bit, and they'll say,
Right.
okay. And half the time, you might have to insure that product because you're holding
Mhm.
on to it. There's a process, but fine. At least you're getting paid. You don't have to carry the money because by the time the steel shows up or the switchgear shows up, you'll have a check from them and you can give it to the vendor and you're not in the hole.
Mhm.
It's just being proactive about these big jobs and thinking through like how are you going to get paid and when. If you jump on the job and wait 30 to 60 days to send your first rec, you're gonna be paddling the shit canoe because you're gonna
How
run out of money real quick.
how important do you think it is to have a just have a relationship period with the in this case the contractor, the maybe the general?
Oh, very, very, very. That relationship. I mean, you got to have it on two sides, in my opinion. One, with the guy you did the estimating with, or somebody in the office, the higher ups. Then the project manager, you have to make them your best friend. Make their life, we've talked about this, you've talked
Mhm.
about this, make their life easier, show them some value, and they will go to the ends of the earth. Because when you go to them and you're like, dude, your office isn't paying me, and they're like, let me make a call. And they call the office and they're like, you got to pay this guy. Pay him first because he makes our lives so much easier. That's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease.
Mhm.
You don't do it in a bitching fashion because you think you're the only person bitching to him that you're not getting paid. He doesn't want to hear it. They don't care. They do,
Right.
but there's nothing they can do. But if you're the guy that's like, dude, I'm here to help you and make this better, they go to the ends of the earth for you.
Mhm.
Doesn't
And
mean you're gonna get paid. It just means they're gonna
it
they're gonna be on your side.
it's not a guarantee, but it does help.
Oh yeah.
And when subcontractors get into these contracts, one thing that I try to encourage people to do, and this is one of the things that shocks me, is that before you sign the dotted line, just have a meeting, have a conversation so you can ensure the scope of work. That way you know what's included, you know what exclusions are, you understand maybe the payment terms, you understand provisions, you understand liquidating damages, you understand time expectations, but you're also ensuring that the line of work that the scope of work that you're proposing aligns with the scope of work that they're saying in their contract.
And again, they're the ones that create the time, the schedules or the Gantt charts to these
Mm-hmm.
projects. And you got to pay attention to those too, because they're the ones expecting that you get things done in a certain time. And they build the entire schedule around that. And that's where that language inside talks about holding to schedule. And if you don't, there's back charges. So there's a lot of moving pieces to a larger project that you got to pay attention to. I'm not saying you have to understand every word in that contract, because most of it's copy and paste redundant crap.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the contracts are only there when things go wrong. If everything goes right, nobody even opens the thing or pays attention to it. But the second something goes wrong, like you decide you're not going to show up to the job because you haven't been paid for 90 days because you weren't proactive, they'll pull out the contract, and that's where shit gets ugly.
So let's run through a scenario. If let's say that there's structural steel and the structural steel doesn't get installed on time, and now you're waiting as the electrician to come in, how does that affect your part of the contract when the guys in front of you push the timeline back?
I mean, that's the whole purpose of the master contract from the GC. It creates a ripple effect and screws up everybody. Because regardless of what happens on a job, for those of you who know this or don't know this, they don't give a shit what happens with your material and your vendor and your subcontractor and that subcontractor. The end date is still the end date, and you will get it done. Most of the time, that is the case. You will get it done by that date. If not, they want it done sooner because they're wildly unrealistic in their expectations. So now you've delayed it. You've screwed up everybody. So now you've taken the electrician's job that was supposed to be 3 weeks, and you've delayed him a week. So now he's got 2 weeks to do the same work. That creates a shit show for everybody. And it's just part of business. Sometimes it might not be your fault. Sometimes it might.
Yeah.
But you gotta be aware of everybody else. And if you're when I was project managing commercial jobs, my communication to the contractor was, I will not be the guy that holds you up. Don't worry. I know there's only 2 guys there today and you're stressed out. Do not worry. I will hit the deadline. Don't worry about me. Worry about the other guys. I'll get it done on time. I don't hold up projects. Work with me and I'll work with you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's it too, because you and I both know as projects are built, the way the work was going to be done sometimes changes.
Sometimes.
So that's being kind.
I'd like to live in that world. Where is that?
It always changes. And I think what happens, instead of people being proactive with conversations and communicating and looking at the schedule and having meetings, now they end up in a goddamn argument or a fight.
It becomes
they're like, well, the fucking electricians held me back, or you said that we had room to do this. And it's like, you've got to have that communication. And if there's anything contractual that's going to change the timeline, you need that new contract. You need that written agreement that says we have extended the time frame for this part of the project for this here and here. Otherwise, now it's hearsay. And the superintendent's usually not going to side with one subcontractor. They're going to be like, hey man, it's the contract. You've got to have this done. So then you end up in this pissing match, and then it can get ugly. So kind of reeling this back a little bit, when you've got 3 weeks of work to do and you only have 2 weeks to do it, Greg, how do you know if you can afford to do 3 weeks of work in 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, first, do you have the manpower to do it? And 2, if you have to hire the manpower to do it, do you have the money to hire the extra manpower to do it? Because again, remember, you got to front that. So big jobs do sound glorious, and yes, they can work well, but you have to be smart enough on the business side to handle that growth. It's like going to the gym and being like, I'm going to start working out. You start with 25 curls and you're like, you know what? This isn't really working for me. And you go to the gym the next day and you try to start curling the 80s. Go ahead. Let me know how many you get in. Not going to work. Same applies to business.
Right.
You can't just go into it. You have to slowly work into it, slowly build a company. You can do bigger jobs, but don't go from doing $10,000 jobs to $300,000 jobs. Go from 10,000 to 50,000 to 100,000 to 150,000 and work your way up that way. Don't try to bite off large ones because it will create more stress for you than it's worth. Unless there's some golden opportunity where you think this thing's going to be an absolute home run and you're willing to stress yourself to the hills
Mhm.
and you have some fluff that you think you can manage, be careful.
Mhm.
I'm all about taking risk and going for it, but you got to be smart. And I've done this the wrong way
Mhm.
a few times in the beginning. You get excited. You're like, oh, this $200,000 job. It sounds great. And don't get confused by the big dollar amount. Because at the end of the day, the big dollar doesn't mean shit without margin.
Right.
I would rather do $100,000 jobs than $1 million job if I was getting 1% of the $1 million job versus 30% of the $1,000 jobs. The dollar amount means nothing.
Mhm.
And this is the illusion. And don't let contractors use that against you. Like, I've given you $1 million job. That's one of my favorite lines. Okay, you gave me $1 million, but it cost me $1 million. Thank
Mhm.
you for stressing me out for a year and playing 0% bank and doing all this work for
Right.
no reward.
Well, and then some of the contractors are like, well, you make 20% and I only make 2. It's like, oh, okay.
Well, at the end, let's play that card. Let's lay out our money and see what we made at the end. Well, no, that's your problem. Okay, yeah, I know it's my problem, but you think I'm making 20%, but because you screwed up the whole schedule and the steel didn't get in, and I was 2 weeks delayed, and I had to hire 2 more contractors. I lost my shirt on this job because I had to pay them out, and it cost me more than I anticipated. I had to redo work because of something you screwed up. GCs can make or break a project.
Mhm.
And the better you communicate with them, like Josh said, and be on their side instead of fighting them, the better off you'll be. If everybody did that, the project will go smooth. But one little hiccup happens, and then somebody decides to want it's a finger pointing game. And we live in a society where it's always somebody else's fault. Nobody can take accountability for their actions. Shit happens, man. You fall on your sword, you make money on the next one. It's a wild game
Mhm.
in the big project department, but you
Well,
got to be smart. You have to be smart.
if people stop focusing on the problem and start focusing on the solution, things would move so much better.
The world would move better if that were the case.
Well,
That doesn't just apply to business.
yeah, but I'm trying to be realistic here. So I don't want to give fortune cookie advice to the globe.
If you can do it in business, why can't you do it in life?
I know.
It's just a part of life.
That's how I operate. I will tell you that that's 100% how I operate. I don't get excited too easily because I know there's a solution. It's like, all right, we have identified the problem. Now let's focus on a solution. And I
Right.
try to approach jobs that way and relationships that way and conversations that way. It's like, hey, let's make this a problem solving conversation.
But it's not, I mean, yes, we live in a world where people turn things into more than they need to be. Because if you put as much effort into finding a solution to the problem than bitching out about the problem,
Mhm.
it would have been solved long before you even got that upset. However, there's a part of that that sucks that society doesn't like to deal with. And that's the fact that sometimes you got to eat crow. Like, yeah, you fucked up. You got to own it. You got to eat it. It's going to
Mhm.
cost you money. It's going to hurt. But the faster you get through it, the faster you can move on to something that makes you money. I screw up all the time and I own it. And people appreciate that. They're like, okay, I thought I was going to have to fight with you over this, but no, I screwed up. Here's your money. Sorry. It won't
Mhm.
happen again. And then they're
Mhm.
like, you know what? We want to work with that person again.
Right.
They were a man of their word. They knew they screwed up. We called them out on it. They're like, yep, I fucked up. I'm going to eat it. We're going to finish the job out. There have been jobs where I have eaten 6 figures and I finished the job with a smile. They're freaking out like, you're going to run. We know you're losing money. They're not stupid at that point. Like, they know that I've been on the job way longer than I need to be and done way more than I had to be. And I still finished the job. And I reassure them, like, I am eating my shorts on this one,
Mhm.
but I stand behind what I do. I signed up for this. The communication got screwed up. Half of it was my fault. Let's work together to finish this project. And they're fucking blown away. My team wants to strangle me because they want to run, but you can't. That's how you
Yeah.
burn bridges in
Let
relationships.
man,
You screwed up.
so you just cracked open a can there, and that's something that I think is interesting that I want to
That's a whole nother
discuss.
podcast.
Do what?
That's a whole nother podcast.
It is, but how your team gets frustrated, and this is something that I see too, is like when does why does the team get to determine when they should be done with a project because they're tired of being on it? We should be done with this already. I don't know why we're still here.
That's
Um, you're tired of
yeah,
being here?
yeah,
What?
yep. Yep. I don't even have anything to say to that.
I don't know why it's a thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I have been on jobs too long, and you have that sense
boredom,
of
stagnancy.
stagnant
That's a
boredom,
word.
frustration. It is now, and it's like, God damn, I don't want to go back to that job. We were doing a factory. We were putting air conditioning in a factory that didn't have AC before, and it was one of those jobs. I'm like, oh my God, we have got to get this done. And from an owner standpoint, I have different reasons as to why we need to get done because we are postponing other projects, or now we're working overtime, or I'm pulling guys out and putting them on this stuff. But for the operators that are on the job site, like it's like just because you're tired of being there doesn't mean that you get to dictate when you leave.
Or check
And
out. Like check out of the
right,
job. Like I'm not
right.
interested in doing this anymore, so I'm not going to do my job.
Hmm.
I've seen that in the production tanks off. So if you just hammer through and get it done, we'd be out of here. But you want to drag your feet and bitch about the fact that you're still freaking here. Well,
And that
don't
goes
freaking be
back
here anymore.
and that goes back to problem versus solution. They just
Right.
want to swim in the problem. They just want to tread water in the problem. It's like, oh well, fuck it, if we're gonna be here. It's like, get it done and you can leave.
That's society, though.
I know.
We spend more time complaining than we do. If we put the energy that we put into complaining every day into solutions and fixing problems,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be a place in the universe that could touch us.
There would be no liberals.
Stop crying and just work. That's
Just
it.
do it.
Just get it done.
Yeah.
Just find the problem. Stop complaining about the problem. Find a solution to the problem. Use your energy to find solutions to every problem you have instead of complaining about it. Try that on.
Yeah. So the mistake here is people think that complaining is problem solving.
Oh, and never. 0% of the time. All that does is amplify the problem. Just turns up the volume. Because it stresses everybody else out. It gets everybody else thinking. It gets your own self thoughts thinking. You get yourself in a spiral. Like, yeah, this is really bad. It's not. It's all on how you deal with the problem. And you can choose to use your energy, your precious time and energy, to complaining about it and bitching about it and stomping your feet and trying to avoid it, which is inevitable. You're going to have to face it at some point, or you just march through the door and face it. Take it and get through it, because it'll be far less painful for you and everybody else. And that's easier said than done. We're all guilty of getting trapped in it. But that's it. My team comes to me all the time, and it's like the world's on fire. And I'm like, all right, here's the fire hose. Let me put it all out. What is the real problem? I'm like, that's not even a problem. Click, it's fixed. There you go. Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's it. That was it. Carry on.
Part of that too, looking at the team, is, to me, that means that they've gotten too far removed from the plan. And sometimes it just takes a leader stepping up, detaching them for a moment and going, okay, let's regroup, let's recenter, let's create a new plan from this moment forward and figure out how we're going to complete this thing. And creating that realignment in the team and in the employees, and even having, that leader having a conversation with the superintendent and detaching them from a moment and just being like, hey, we're behind. I know we're behind. This is our plan from today moving forward of how we're going to get this done. You're communicating and you're getting everyone realigned. So now the people running the project understand the plan for the people doing the project. And it's
pitch that to the subcon. Don't go to them and say, what are we going to do to make this better? Go to them with a plan. Yeah. Say, hey, this is my plan to make up for their heads will explode. You'll be, I promise you'll be one of one to come up to them with a solution, because they're freaked out and they're stressed out and they're going to take it out on you, which is going to amplify the situation with you and them. where you could come to them and say, I know you're stressed out. Don't even say it. They know it. You know it.
Mhm.
You know they're stressed out because they have to deal with you in every other trade. So they're dealing with all of it, not just you. So if you come to them with a piece of solution, oh, their head's they won't even know what to do.
They will help you
They'll be like,
every
you're
way
fucking
that
with
they
me, right?
can.
Like,
They'll be like,
this is a
"Hey,
joke.
you fucking with me?" Yeah.
Am I being punked? Seriously. You'd be
They
surprised.
yeah. They will help you though. If you come to them with a plan,
100%.
they will help you execute that plan.
And if they don't, they're a douche.
Well, I agree. But having that conversation with them and recognizing that again, it's I think that's one of the things about being stuck in a problem is we never detach ourselves from the problem to spend time to come up with a solution or a new plan of attack. It's like
But
we just keep beating our head against this brick wall.
that's a good point, Josh. I mean, next time you're complaining about a problem, go ahead and complain about it, sure. But stop for 1 second. Just trigger yourself, remind yourself for 1 second to just look at it from far away. If
Mhm.
that was somebody else complaining and they had that problem, how would you see it? If it didn't affect you emotionally, how would you look at it and
Mhm.
solve it? You might be like, that's stupid. Why am I even getting upset about that?
So I have this practice that and I did it last week. I was on a job site last week. We're constructing this steel deck, composite top, stainless steel cable hand railing. A beautiful but fairly complex project, and we ran into a snag. I have this practice where I will physically walk away, and then I will turn around and look at the project from a completely different perspective. So I physically remove myself from the problem,
Like,
and I give myself physical distance, and every time it helps me come up with a solution because I'm not staring at it in the face. I mean, I'll even take my rig off. I'll take my tool belt off. I may grab something to drink, but I will go stand away. And when you just sit there and continue to hammer in the face of this problem, you're blind to the solution. And if you step back far enough, you can look around the corner and go, "Oh, we can do it this way." And it's such a great solution. So I share that because that's one of the practices that I have developed for myself, and that's what I have discovered works for me in problem solving.
and that's all problems, personal and business,
Hmm.
work, anything. You can use that in anything. Your kids, sometimes I know you want to strangle them. Step back and be like, okay, that's right. They're kids. They're not little
Yeah,
adults that I have to fight with because you're used to arguing with contractors all day and you want to come home and argue with your kids like they're contractors.
yeah,
They're kids. You got to look at it for what it is,
hmm
not what you're seeing in that moment.
yeah. You're too close to it,
Too
and
close.
that's ultimately if you can't come up with a solution, you're too close to it. So anyway, that's
Life advice.
life advice. That's me sharing. Look at us sharing. Oh gosh. Looking at um talking about cash flow and talking about money. This is obviously one of the reasons that you need to have a grasp on and an understanding of the financials of your business because
Yep.
you need to know. So how do you know if you can afford to take on a project, Greg?
Do you have any cash? And how much cash do you have relative to the size of your business? That's why there should always be, and we just talked about this recently. Somebody brought up a good question. They asked me how much should they have in their business account at
Oh,
any
this
given
was in the
point.
boot camp.
Yep. And the base rule of thumb, I say between 10 and 20%. 10% if you're maintaining, 20% if you're growing. People are like, well, how do I do that? Like, I'm not asking you to just go grab a whole chunk of 20% of what you made this year. And this is of gross revenue, by the way. I don't expect you to, but you can accumulate it. Every project you do, if you're paying attention to your profitability of each job, why not take 20% of that job and put it in a savings account? Like storing money in a shoebox.
Hmm.
Just it's the rainy day fund. Put it aside. And if you need it, you can pull it back. That's what it's there for, with the intention of putting it back. So slowly be aggressive in the beginning and save as much as you can because that'll prevent you from spending it. So know that, okay, 20% of every job is going to get put in a savings account. You build that up until you get 10 to 20% of your gross revenue in a savings account. If you're growing, the 20% is probably a better idea because you're going to need a lot of cash flow. And the bigger you get, the more you're going to need.
Mhm.
And it's relative, right, to the amount of revenue that you're making. If you're maintaining, closer to the 10% is fine. You might not even need that if you're a well-oiled machine, but it's a good baseline and a good place to start. And if you're doing $1 million and you don't have 100,000 fluctuating in the account, that doesn't mean you have to be 100,000 perfect all the time. You could be 80, you could be 120. As long as the average is 100, that's fine. I like to see it in a separate account. I like to have an operating account that has that fluctuation, so I know what my average expenses are, and it goes up and down, up and down. But the savings account just sits there. That money's there for when we decide to go from a $100,000 project to $1 million project, and I'm like, I'm going to need $200,000 in cash. So instead of borrowing it at 7%, I can borrow it from myself.
Mhm.
If you really want to get crafty, you can pay yourself interest on it and make money.
Right.
Because you can factor that in. And to touch back on that real quickly, I have heard lately that guys are including some form of finance fee in their bids. So they know they're going to carry $200,000 rolling through this project. So they say, okay, I'll let you borrow that $200,000, but I might have to borrow it. So if I have to borrow it, and even if you don't have to borrow it, you're a bank. So pretend you're borrowing it and put some points on it to cover some of that. And from what I gather, it's being received somewhat well. Haven't actually tried it yet, but this is what I hear through the grapevine through some larger contractors. So just a side piece there to touch on that. But yeah, that's how you know. If I know that most businesses are, as they're growing, are living check to check. That's got to stop. And that starts with the profitability of each job. Start at that level. I'm not asking you to go find 20 grand and stuff in an account or 100 grand and stuff in an account. I'm asking you to slowly build it just like you would a savings account at home. And if you're not doing that at home, I suggest you start there and then go into business. Should be done on both sides. What you practice on one, you practice on the other. And that's a whole nother podcast of the reflection of personal finances into business and how that mirror shines or doesn't.
I already have ideas of that podcast conversation because I would like to also dive into how to pay yourself. And if you don't have that personal discipline, paying yourself from the company can be a recipe for disaster. So we will do an entire separate episode on that. How should people use their line of credit?
Carefully.
What do you see people do using it wrong? How do people misuse their line of credit?
They use it to dig themselves out of a hole. So you can use it proactively or reactively. If you're using it reactively, that means you've done something terribly wrong. If you're using it proactively, you again, this is part of the project piece. Like you have to account for the fact that it's coming and you have to somehow make up for it. But I do everything in my power. I have 2 lines of credit. One of them I've never touched. The other one I dabbled in a little bit when I was getting going and fronting some of these projects as I was growing. But my priority was to pay that back first. Everything else is secondary to that getting paid back first. You don't want that debt hanging on a business. It's there as a tool to grow, but you have to be very careful with it. Don't use it as a piggy bank. If you have to dive into a line of credit and you're like, I've worked really hard this year, I deserve a new truck, and you have $20,000 rolling in a line of credit that you haven't paid off, do not buy that truck until the line of credit is paid for. Do not buy that jet ski. Do not buy that Harley. Do not buy that boat. You deserve, I'm sorry, nothing. Because you didn't do your job. And your job, as Josh talks about, is not owner. It is a position in the company. And your job is to maintain that cash flow. And if you're not doing your job, then sorry, you should be fired. Fortunately, in business, the only way to get fired from your own business is to close it.
Well, the IRS can escort you out of there too.
for close. It ends in the same result. That ends
Same,
much
same
more.
result, different method.
Different outcome. Yes. But you got to be smart. And that all comes down to financial discipline. That is the most important thing. If you are a personal financial disaster, then your business is going to be a mirror of that without question.
Mhm.
You got to start personally. And that's where I built that calculator, Josh, and put that together just so people get and yeah, on that last webinar there, I saw some eyeballs that half didn't want to admit it, but they didn't like what they see when they put the numbers in.
Mhm.
But most people don't. They just they assume like I make X amount a month and I have X amount in bills. They don't actually break it down to the penny and see what it costs them and what they need. And again, that's a whole nother podcast.
Mhm. The last podcast that I did solo, I talked a lot about personal value. And what I've learned in business is your business is a direct reflection of you. So the good and bad habits that you have, your company has. So if you have poor financial habits, your company has poor financial habits. If you live on, if you accept on living on just enough, your company operates on just enough. And if you don't have that high level of personal value and that financial discipline and a financial plan to grow, you can't get out of that rat race. You can't get off of that hamster wheel of paycheck to paycheck or leveraging line of credit, or credit cards, or paying yourself just enough. Like you really have to peel it all the way back and start the conversation with yourself, because again, you just operate your business how you operate yourself. I haven't seen anyone that's got a high profitable multi-million dollar company and personally they're just, I'm not saying that they may not have a lot of debt, but what I'm saying is that they're not living at a much lower level than their business is performing. Usually that tide
They're
raises
hand in
both
hand.
ships.
Yeah.
So those behaviors, that mindset, that attitude it directly impacts how your business operates. So if you are used to leveraging bad debt to make financial decisions in your personal life, it's exactly how you're going to operate your business. And leveraging the line of credit, that's one of those examples. Like you can't use the line of credit as a piggy bank, like you said.
No. That is the emergency fund, last resort, and first priority.
Mhm.
If you have to use it, understand that something has gone wrong, and it's a safety device. It's a lifeline. Use it and then replenish it. Get out of it as fast as you can.
Yeah, what he said. So
No different in the credit card department either.
that's right. Again, managing that debt, your ability to manage finances. You can't manage debt without being able to manage money. Because if you're trying to manage debt, you're managing an attitude problem or a behavior problem. And I'll make this my final note on company spending, because this is something that I have witnessed, is when the the spouse or family member of the owner has a card that's connected to the company account, and they don't work in the company.
I'm not gonna. Nope. We're gonna save this for another one. I'm not even gonna dive into that one. No response.
No comment at this time.
I'm just gonna say no.
Right.
And then we're gonna move on and we'll talk about that in another
Okay.
one. No.
We'll stick a pin in that for the next conversation.
Yeah.
So,
It's too early to get that elevated.
oh, I know. Yeah, right. I still have some coffee left to drink. I just wanted to throw that on the table as an identifier of personal financial discipline. So you have to have it on all aspects. But anyway, guys, get to the Business Builder September 26th and 27th. Again, St. Louis, Chesterfield. It is a blast. Greg is going to be there. I will be there. We are the two builders that teach that course, and we're going to go through everything that here on the podcast that you see in the boot camp and that you hear us talk about here. So we're going to dive into financials, into leadership, into business, into operations, into hiring and firing, and all of the little pieces in between. Greg, good to see you this morning.
Likewise.
Yeah, man. So, hey, have you got it set up? Can people find you anywhere yet?
I mean, kinda. I mean, through True Pros. I mean,
Okay.
you can DM me.
We
Or
got to
send,
we got to get you an Instagram or something. People can find you better.
yeah, I mean, that's the only thing right now is True Pros. I have
Okay.
there's a True Pros account. I think it's my True Pros. That's what it is.
You think?
Shows how much
Perfect.
That's terrible, right? No, you can find me there. If you want to DM me there, you can. I do poke into it. I just I don't really push it that hard as I should.
Right.
Though.
Yeah.
So,
It's
yeah.
Just a good place to connect.
Yep.
So anyway, go find him. I am on Instagram at The Tradesman Experience. Email is thetradesmanexperience@gmail.com. Website's thetradesmanexperience.com. And the YouTube channel is The Tradesman Experience. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Get out there, get shit done. Be proud to be a tradesman. See ya.